the sheriff's office budget starts on about page 60. As the commission's aware, there are two major operations in jail. They don't have any supplemental requests this year. The sheriff's office budget does have a lot of movement kind of back and forth between departments and funds as they move and allocate staff between the two departments. So I don't know if anyone has any specific questions on the jail budget, or if there's anything Steve or Gary would like to say at the beginning.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
I don't have anything unless there's any questions.
So I'll just throw out a question to maybe get us talking here, because we gotta, we would love to hear updates about how you put together your budget. Like, one thing that I noticed is travel and training budget jumped there. That's on line 6100. And Sarah, this is just something I've noticed throughout the budget, is everybody's travel and training is increasing, and yet we're not, I'm seeing trainings being canceled left and right or being online. And so I just wondered, give me some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, overall, most departments, we have centralized travel training in our countywide budget. Some departments where, like ECC and the sheriff's office, where we have some chargeback for costs, we do allocate some travel training to theirs. You're correct, a lot of travel and training is being canceled, but a lot of it's being offered at the same price online. And while I agree that that's, not the same, but we still want to try to make some sort of commitment to try to get people trained and have exposure to the types of materials they have. I would say that, at least from what I'm seeing on the operations division budget, they spent about $6,000 last year, about $5,400. So my assumption is that change was made to be more reflective of what the actual costs were. But I could see if there's room in the countywide budget, if that's if that was an issue that we could attribute it to countywide.
I mean, I don't want to go nitpicking on each individual line. I mean, but it's just something to think about as we think about how costs are going to change.
Yeah.
So it's a combination.
I know this is for the 2021 budget, but who knows what January is going to look like, and we may be back to doing more trainings face to face by then, for all we know. So Steve, why don't you talk a little bit? We usually talk about it, the challenges of hiring for the sheriff's department. Are you guys still struggling with that?
As far as the hiring, Commissioner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been difficult. We're going to struggle with that for quite some time. I think, well, especially in today's climate, it's going to be even harder. We're going to have to work really hard at that. Yeah.
Under Sheriff Buckles, how many people do you have in the current recruit class that graduates here soon?
Gary, can you comment on that?
Which one? We've got
I think there's one that graduates next week, isn't there?
Yeah, we've got an
Police
LP,
Academy
recruit class that will have 5.
Yeah, those are
Thank you.
Is there, so you got 5 in the class. Is that less or more than what you've had in previous years?
It fluctuates depending on what the jail can allow. I want to say we had,
Yeah, generally what we do is we'll get consensus among the shift supervisors of how many people we can afford to send. So this time it was 5 as far as commissioning people to deputy sheriff.
I'm gonna follow up on Commissioner Kelly's question about the travel. And I know, I don't know if maybe there's, I know that the sheriff just retired recently, so I don't know how much of the budget preparation he was involved in or how much you guys were involved in. So the line that Commissioner Kelly was looking at, the 60100, 2020 budget said 3,500, and then it said 2020 estimated 6,000. And there was some talk about training still going on, but when you go down to 60140, the cost of training went from 17,500 and dropped to 10,000. So it is a little confusing trying to figure out why where training's down but travel's up as far as.
And I would say that generally we have budgeted on one line and then accumulated the cost on another. I don't know if this year the sheriff's office decided to kind of go a different, are you guys talking about operations or jail? Because I'm trying to follow those numbers and.
We're on operations, Sarah.
Okay.
62.
Okay.
and the total is the same. That's a combination of all those.
Oh, I also want to say that this was mostly done pre-COVID pandemic.
So that sort of begs a question to me. Is there anything here that you think might change based on our pandemic? I mean, I've sort of wondered that throughout our budgets here, Sarah, you know, which ones were developed prior to pandemic and which ones, is there anything that you're seeing that's going to be a higher cost or a lower cost? Is it all just going to wash out in the end?
Well, I mean, I would say overall as a general on the budget, you know, we took those, we took a conservative approach to estimating expenses. So if we knew that we anticipated a higher cost because of the pandemic, we accounted for that in the re-estimate. But, you know, I would say that while, you know, accommodation, you know, travel maybe went up, and I can't really speak to the sheriff's office budget, but generally on the countywide budget, we just budget one number and sort of see how it fills out. And in my estimation, you know, we're going to try to encourage folks to do as much training as possible online during this year, because it's important that our staff remain trained. Whether or not they take an airplane to fly there or they just sit in their office and listen to a webinar for 40 hours a week, you know, it's important that we try to get the training if at all possible.
The hard part for us is, you know, we don't know what this year is going to hold as far as the whole COVID issue. So we were trying to budget just in case. You know, that's the hard part. The state reduced the training hours required for law enforcement officers. We just don't know how this is going to all play out.
So like when I look at those lines on page 62, they seem to be more reflective of what happened in 2019 in terms of actual expenditures. If that's, I mean, however, departments have the authority to they should spend where the line's appropriate. So if it's truly a travel cost, it should be costed to travel. If it's a training cost, it should be costed to training. But we don't hold them, they don't have there's not a budget violation if they exceed a particular line item. So if that's something you want us to look at to revise to make it more reflective of 2020, I can have the sheriff's office take a look at it.
And I'll just
Go ahead.
throw this out. I mean, this year is different, of course. And we always try to do as much in-house training as we can. Specialized courses and instructor courses and so on. Those can't be done online. Those have to be, I mean, you have to travel for those. And quite honestly, I mean, we have more training than we have time to train. And I think people, especially right now, are screaming for more training.
Sarah, I'm satisfied with the way we're doing it. I'm just trying to get some conversation going around our budget here a little bit. So just throwing out some questions.
I would say that, so if you move into, you received some additional information on equipment reserve for the sheriff's office. Their equipment reserve transfer does change a little bit from year to year. I think that was in one of the first sets of stuff that we passed through to the commission once we started hearings. As you move into the jail budget, those numbers were somewhat revised based off 2019 actuals in terms of reimbursements. So overall, those are down a little bit, and they're down for 2020 as well. So we re-estimated that down to reflect kind of both what we had actually received and what I think we had experienced to date in terms of jail payments. And then here really the big issues inside the jail budget revolve around out-of-county prisoner care and professional medical services. Those lines were, well, we kept the professional medical services line flat. And then there was a reduction in out-of-county prisoner care for 2020. Pretty significant one. And I know that is based off of the difficulty the sheriff's also need and some uncertainty whether or not the sheriff's office.
Yeah, and it was lowered this year. We're not housing as many out this year. So that's why that's a lower. We have no idea about next year, what that's going to bring.
And that number was lower in 2019. That is, that's a converse, that could be perhaps reduced into 2021 if we felt like, something about being able to manage jail population. But this has also been an area where we've sort of held some contingency to make sure that we could accommodate that. And also is a significant part of, why our general fund has ended in such a positive manner over the last several years. And while and their transfer to equipment reserve is a little bit less in the jail budget than it's been in previous years. I do think it's important to note that while the security project is proceeding, correct? Internally, Steve and Gary,
Yes.
and that's going pretty well. As the commission is aware of, the central plant and elevators at the jail are at the end of their useful life. At some point in time, we're going to need to make a decision as to how do we plan for those upgrades and replacements.
Yeah, definitely.
Does anybody have any other questions for the sheriff's office?
I do not.
Okay. You know, the only thing I would ask is, you know, maybe we've done this before, and I really appreciate the sheriff's office continuing to participate in our criminal justice stakeholder conversations. You know, I know that, but one of those things, I think if you have any sort of updates, it's probably been a week or two since we've talked about how you're managing jail population and isolation of individuals as they enter the jail, to make sure that so we can try to keep our inmate population safe. Is there any updates you can give to us on that in terms of you know, things that you might need as we approach an increase in folks in the jail, and how we can continue to keep folks safe?
Well, you know, I think we really don't know what to anticipate at this point. I mean, we know our numbers are going to go up, and it's going to be increasingly difficult to try to manage the COVID situation with the numbers that we have. You know, right now it's kind of a waiting game, you know, especially with the courts getting ready to reopen. You know, really my big fear is that we won't be able to quarantine people anymore, because we just won't have the space to do it.
And, you know, one of the things, Gary, that Judge McCabria spoke to us about earlier today was about trying to, you know, really institutionalize, you know, video appearances, so there's less inmate travel. Is that how, can you maybe talk through how that change has been? And do you feel like you have sufficient resources inside your budget to accommodate that change?
Yeah, one of the things that we're planning on doing is with video visitation, we want to make it possible to where when the courts approve it, doing more video court appearances. You know, that's in the works right now.
And do you feel like you have the technology to be able to accommodate that as there are more and more hearings? Or are you using that courtroom?
Yeah, I feel we are. Actually, the company we're involved with, we've actually had a relationship with them for the for the past several years, and it'll actually come at no cost for us. So it'll be a pretty good deal.
For first appearance, or for appearance as well as visitation?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions for the sheriff's office, we can just move on and talk about Pam's budget for criminal justice services. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. One thing I wanted to say at the top of this, so as the commission knows, we initially when we expanded or moved community corrections into criminal justice services and expanded and then aligned all of our associated costs with our alternatives to incarceration with criminal justice services, they were in a separate fund. As we learned through our process, that was probably not the best approach, was to have them in a separate fund. So then we moved them back into the general fund. So when you look at this budget, there's lots of back and forth as to how that is set up. They are inside the general fund now. They had a fund balance in that separate fund that was moved into the general fund balance, correct, Cami and Pam?
Yes.
Okay. So part of our increased fund balance totals were some fund balances from that. And their budget starts on page 70.
And this is like this,
Go ahead, Pam.
this is about the third iteration of what we've been doing on the budget. I think every year it changes, which has been kind of complicated as we move forward. One thing you'll see, some of the numbers look larger because drug court was a separate thing that we added back into our CJS budget this year. So when you see some increases in training and stuff, those came directly from the drug court budget when we moved it back into our CJS budget after you guys approved it last year. We're just super busy over here. I wanted to kind of give you the numbers, just to make sure we're all familiar. The electronic monitoring, you'll see the money that's set aside is pretty big. The monthly report you get from CJ, from the criminal justice coordinator, doesn't really reflect how many people we're actually monitoring. We have about 79 to 80 people on any given day that we're monitoring on electronic monitoring. The number you see in the report is the people who are on house arrest. So they're two different things, but the 79 includes everyone. So we're monitoring those folks every day. We have 15 people in behavioral health court currently. We have 5 in drug court, but I know there's one in the mix that's coming, I think, this Friday. And then we have 179 on pretrial, which is the highest number we've ever had. I think that kind of reflects that folks out here are pretty busy. And the JDC staff help with the house arrest. Currently, they're still doing, all the house arrest units are being monitored by the staff at JDC in the evening and weekends. We are the ones putting all the units on at the JDC. So when a client gets released from jail on electronic monitoring, they report to JDC to be hooked up. So that's how we've done it. So we're not bogging down the jail with having staff sitting out there waiting to be able to release. Community correction. So the pretrial house arrest specialty court staff are rotating because of the way their offices are set up. There was no way to do social distancing. So we have half the staff in and half the staff out pretty much every other day. And we're doing sort of the same thing at community corrections. The administrative staff who have private offices are there full time. The clerical staff are there full time, but the officers rotate because of their office cubes. We really weren't able to do the 6 feet of distancing. And that's working out really well. We're seeing clients on a very by appointment only basis. So we're seeing community corrections, we limit it to 2 clients in the area at any given time. We do UAs, we're doing sweat patches on community corrections clients, youth clients, and all the specialty court and pretrial clients. There's not that many pretrial clients that get UAs. But that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. We've been super busy. I actually thought we might be busier with COVID. I mean, as we try and project what's going to happen, it's really hard to know, you know, as more and more things come into play in terms of the decisions that are made. I just see our client numbers kind of rising slightly. And so far, I think we have the staffing to accommodate that between JDC, youth services staff, and adult services staff. That's working out okay. We kind of consider this our new normal. And so that means that community corrections, we're taking courtesy supervisions from other jurisdictions. The supervision might look a little different because we're doing more Zoom and FaceTime calls, and we see people face-to-face as we need to. We do have some face-to-face visits in the parks, and so we've looked at alternatives to try and maintain spacing and also make it fairly neutral. But we still do see some clients in the office as we need to for UAs, et cetera. So far, I think things are going really, really well. We're attending almost all of our court hearings via Zoom to, you know, as the court has requested, and that's working out really well for us. We're supposed to meet with Judge Hanley this morning to talk about, there's a new ruling that allows community corrections staff to what they call quick dips, put somebody in the jail for a quick dip for a sanction. Just because you're allowed to do it doesn't mean that's the policy that we're going to have. It's still our position that there should be other ways to sanction folks without jail. And I think it's our position that we don't think the quick dips really do anything in terms of changing behavior. And so it's unlikely that we'll be using that, even though it's allowed. So that kind of gives you a little brief rundown. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Pam, I had a couple things I thought you might highlight to the commission. So when I look at the adult services budget, so this is on page 74, the housing assistance, did that come over from drug court?
Some of that came from drug court, and some of that was money we had set aside in community corrections. So it's all together now. And we've had, you know, through COVID, we have provided some housing assistance, food assistance, and things for some of our clients. Our clients are really kind of at risk, usually. So we're trying to help them in any way we can. We've really spent more of our time, I think, supporting clients than really, I wouldn't say we're supervising, but it really feels more supportive. And they're actually really happy to hear from us and talk to us. And I think it's been a really stressful time for most of the clients that we're serving.
And your urine analysis budget, you know, I know you mentioned that you're still doing UAs. Can you just, I was just to refresh my memory, this is where we've centralized all UAs for both all your adult service program and court services into this budget? Is this?
We don't have court services in there any longer. So it's just the adult services UAs and sweat patches.
Okay, and not municipal court?
Not municipal court. We don't do anything for municipal court other than electronic monitoring.
Okay. And then just to point out for commissioners, like on page 75, you see where the increase is there for the budget to DECA. That reflects drug court. And just moving it around for the 21 budget to reflect where those expenses will actually hit, as well as, the Burt Nash line is related to behavioral health court, and there has been a reduction on that line. And I would say that that has been both a, as the commissioner is well aware, we had a review of the behavioral health court done in 2019. And we've been evaluating those services to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck with those services from Burt Nash. So there has been a realignment and reduction of, and actually I feel like the service level is consistent, if not up, but we've clarified the billing. And I don't know, Pam or if you have anything to add to that, or Mike.
I think it was more like we wanted to reflect the direct service and not so much supervision.
Supervision of the employees.
The employees, yes, I'm sorry.
Right.
I think it better reflects what the real cost is versus what we had before.
Pam, can you give us sort of an update on the success of behavioral health court and drug court? I mean, how are those, are you seeing good results from those?
So far in terms of drug court, we have the same 5 we started with. We haven't really had any major issues. We used drug patches those first few weeks, well, several weeks, as we try and assist these people to stay drug-free, alcohol-free. They're meeting with Shannon Brugge regularly. We see him out here all the time. I think it's going well. I think the behavioral health clients feel supported. I know they're doing a lot of Zoom and in-person contacts with those folks as they need it. I think it's really going better than I would have guessed, given the situation we're in currently with the distancing, et cetera. But I think, like I said, mostly it feels like we're doing a lot more support than true supervision. I think it's going really much better than I would have anticipated. And when we talked about drug court for 2021, we want to continue at that 15 clients, because this year is clearly really not a demonstration of how it would ideally work. So we want to, keep those numbers the same. And I think everybody feels pretty good about it at this point.
Pam, I don't know, it's not exactly budget related, but maybe you can, you and I talked, it's probably been a year or 2 ago, about like technical violations and some of those situations. How much of that are you seeing? Is it improving? Kind of what is the process there? How do you handle that, or what flexibility do you have with technical violations? You know what I'm talking about?
Like on community corrections or for the pretrial clients?
Well,
one of the things, let me give you a little information.
okay.
On community corrections, we established a response grid so we could sort of like lay out for officers what they could do within a response grid. So we're not always arresting every time. I mean, clearly we don't arrest that often, but we wanted to have an ability to respond to our clients in a fairly consistent manner. And we discuss, obviously, before we ever, the only time we really file affidavits is if they're AWOL, or if they have a consistent pattern of drug use or something like that. So I think we're doing a better job of that on the community corrections side. And in addition to the response grid, we also create a rewards grid. And so we're doing a lot more positive rewards for compliance. I mean, ideally, I would like the ability to give clients credit for time served whenever they have months of compliance. But the law doesn't allow for that on the adult side. It does on the juvenile side, and it's very motivating. And we've talked about it with the court, and I mean, that might be one of those things that we would want to talk with Stuart Little about. Maybe that's something they could advocate in the reform for adults, is that you'd be allowed to, I mean, we're allowed to sanction them and put them in jail, but we're not allowed to give them days off of their time on probation for compliance. So it seems kind of counterintuitive to me that you have a big hammer, but you don't have very many positives that you can give to clients sometimes. On the adult services side, pretty much if it's a failure to appear in court, or if we have, most of the violations we're having are more like house arrests and non-compliance with house arrest or electronic monitoring, where they're cutting off the device and or letting it run dead, that kind of thing. One of the things during this COVID time, we did turn off the notification system because it was a mess, notifying people about hearings that weren't happening. So hopefully we'll be able to turn on the notification system here shortly to remind people of the video hearings so that they'll have better attendance. I don't know if the failure to appear rate I don't know what it is currently, and I wish we had a better handle on it in terms of the district court. But I think that the court notifications do help. One of the limitations we kind of have is that everybody in pretrial status in full court is not on pretrial supervision. And so we pull all the names from the full court into pretrial software for notification. But the only way to do texting is you have to actually checkbox the people who have texting ability, which we do not know. There are hundreds of people on pretrial status that we are not familiar with and do not know if they have texting capability. And so there's no way for us to check the box to give them texting notifications. So I know that's one of the things that came out of the Stepping Up or Council of State Governments was a recommendation about texting, and we just don't really have the ability to fix that at this point. And I had the impression that Odyssey, the new court software that's supposed to go in next in 2021, is supposed to have it, but I really don't know. I've not seen anything to tell me that my thinking is actually reality. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I gave you a long answer.
No, that was some good information. So I didn't articulate my question very well, but no, you gave me what I was looking for, so thank you. And I know with the FTAs, it's a continuing conversation. I know that Dr. Cravens is providing some good information to the judges, and and some of them are really digging into that. So hopefully we can resolve some of those numbers. But yeah, thank you on the technical violations and some of the things you're doing or limitations that you may have.
I do think that the attendance at video hearings is easier for people. It's less disruptive to your life and your work schedule to attend a video hearing. So I would imagine, I mean, what I've seen so far is the attendance looks pretty good. I don't know what that means actually. I mean, I don't have any factual numbers to tell me differently, but I do think it's been easier for our clients to attend that way.
Yeah, it's a great option that they've been able to provide, I think, because you don't have to worry about either driving, leaving work, driving, parking, or leaving work and
or child
getting on the bus and making connections with other buses. And so no, I think it's a great option, and I hope they can expand it, hopefully.
I just hope it continues even after COVID. I think it's been a really good benefit.
I think it's going to be an interesting strategy. I remember a lot of conversations in 2019 about how we can get people to, their appointments quicker and faster, and now it seems like we're kind of in this sort of new world order where it's less about that. It's more about can they participate? Do they have technology to be able to participate?
Yeah.
So it does feel like some of that stuff is. We're back to the drawing board on it, just evaluating how effective it is and what what we're seeing, and then what, if we need to do more, what do we do to do more?
Well, the interesting thing, I think before COVID, we always thought we can't do this. There's no way to do it. And we've actually learned that we can do it. And actually sometimes it's really beneficial what we've done. So I think, that might be the only positive that comes out of COVID. Is that we've really been forced to relook at what we're doing in our business model and making changes that really actually have helped our clients and the people we serve in a significant way.
Maybe 6 months ago, it feels like we talked about the juvenile detention center and just the use of that facility, and you had talked about a plan for using it a little differently. Can you give us a bit of an update on the juvenile detention center? How many people are there? What counties they're from? How we're using that facility?
I think currently today we have 6 youth. The majority of them are Douglas County. I think we have 1 Brown County female currently. The numbers that kind of go up and down, but it's been around 7 or 8 at any given time. We had started summer school, which you and I've had that conversation, and that kind of got nixed, but we were still supporting kids in summer school and had them actually attending here and getting support from teachers, because we found that the students were really not participating at their own, free will. So when we brought them out here and helped them with access, we had better success. In terms of changing what we're doing at JDC, we really haven't done much. We're not seeing a lot of kids in juvenile intake. We did for a while stop booking kids because of just the distancing, but we have since started that again. So we've already processed everybody that has an agreement to appear or an ATA. The judge, the hearings for juveniles continue for juvenile offenders, and so that really hasn't changed all that much. For us, it feels very similar other than you're on Zoom. But in terms of JDC, we haven't done much. Staff are pretty busy just managing the adult stuff and the house arrest for adults. We're doing fingerprinting for agencies here locally who need fingerprinting for staff by appointment. So we're doing a lot of things with those staff that aren't necessarily JDC related, but they're criminal justice related kind of work. And I think we had talked at one time of, I wanted to meet with the juvenile judge, about what they foresee happening as we move down the road. We had talked about being secure care, but that's been kind of on hold. Just because we still are serving a number of kids from the local community. And we do not currently do any visitation in person. It's all via video or FaceTime kind of stuff. I know the parents would like to see them, but it just really hasn't been advisable to do so. And we quarantine the kids for 72 hours before they're put in general population with the rest of the kids when they do come in. And right now we're just trying to figure out what the fall is going to look like in terms of our truancy program. We're planning to have a roundtable with local schools August 13th via Zoom to talk about truancy, but we don't know what that's going to look like, if the students at KU are going to come back to be supportive advocates for those students or not. We don't know. We don't know what the public school situation is, as you know, and so we're just trying to figure out, planning ahead, what we can do to help support students in the fall for truancy, and then the same with day school. We really don't know what day school is going to look like in the fall. I feel like we have the space out here to space out students so that we can do the distancing. I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's mostly whether we have students in person or not, and how much we have them in person. We don't know. This summer we are, our detention teacher who's been with us since day one is retiring. So we'll have some new personnel here that we'll have to get trained and acclimated to the processes out here. In terms of staffing, we're fully staffed. We have one open position, which we do not plan to fill at this time because we really don't need the position. But everybody else, it's pretty stable in terms of employment. We have a lot of long-term staff out here. We've got people who've stayed with us 20 plus years. So it's pretty impressive.
Pam, I know you mentioned that with secure care, part of the pause on that was because of the numbers we're seeing in terms of detention, but also I think you mentioned to me that there's still some lack of clarity at the state level as to what the regulations are and what would be involved in a move like that too, that makes it just another reason why
it's kind of murky. It's really hard to figure out. And then, it's not technically a county responsibility, but at one point we were seeing so many, what they call children needed care that are runners, which is a huge population of youth that are in Douglas County that have this issue. And there are no secure care centers in Northeast Kansas, but we're still not clear about what the needs are. And with COVID, it's really hard to get a handle on the numbers. And I know the state is still trying to find somebody to do some kind of inpatient crisis center, but then the regulations on that are not clear either. So we're kind of putting the halt on it until we see more specific information from the state of Kansas on what they want. We have been notified, I think Stuart Little sent us something that the state's looking at some budget cuts potentially to departments, and we don't have a clear picture. Originally, we thought that the juvenile justice money was being swept But what we found out, it was already money that's been in a fund that's non-allocated. So it's not money that would directly affect us locally, which was a positive to hear. But we anticipate that there may be some budget cuts in the future that will affect us at the community corrections level. But we just don't have a handle on what that is. I think the state projected they were going to cut $40 million from the Department of Corrections. And I'm not sure where that comes from. So, and I'm doing weekly meetings with the administrative contacts at KDOC and KDOC staff, and we're getting no information in terms of what the impact could be at the local level. So at this point, it's sort of status quo. We don't see any cuts yet, but we anticipate there may be some, and we may be having conversations with Sarah. We'll definitely keep you informed as we learn, whatever that may be.
Other questions for Pam? Okay.
Thank you.
If we don't have any other questions for Pam, I did want to talk to the commission a little bit about the rest of the week and just a reminder of where we are on some certain things. Tomorrow, I will be stepping out of our conversation around, probably can get us started with Heritage, but need to step off to participate in the recovery team call. There are a number of supplementals next week or tomorrow on that. So commission might be aware of that, and Jill can kind of help guide everyone through that process. And then Commissioner Thelman and I, as we start to talk about how to approach deliberations, I wanted to point out that both Commissioner Thelman and I have a BTBC meeting on Thursday morning that I think both of us, at least I was hopeful maybe we didn't need to participate in, but we really do need to be at it at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well in terms of trying to plan for deliberations. I don't know if the commission had more thoughts on how to approach that work over the weekend.
Since we're continuing in phase 3, I would think that we would continue online. It's not my preference to do deliberations online, but I just don't see a way around it. I don't know. Interested to hear from other commissioners, their thoughts. Is that what you're asking, Sarah?
Because, we could, there could be changes to the phasing by July 5th, 13th, if we wanted to try to wait. But I don't know how, I'm not sure from a commissioner's perspective how much back and forth, or conversations we're going to need to have. But if we started Wednesday, I just wanted to let everyone know that I think on Thursday we would need to, if we wanted to continue deliberations via Zoom on Thursday, we would need to start later in the morning.
That'd be fine.
I'm fine with starting later in the morning.
Okay, so if we plan to do them online Wednesday, starting on the 8th at 9 a.m. And then Thursday we would start at approximately, we probably should just plan for 11 to make sure that we could get through with our meeting. It could possibly be 10:30, but it's probably going to be, we should probably just plan for an hour there. And then we have Friday morning as well, depending on how much time we need. And, I did want to mention, we generally, Mike's still on the line here. His budget is included in the administration budget. It reminds me that between countywide and some of our other utility funds, if their commissioners have any questions on any of those, and we're certainly open to discussing them. Your commissioner's budget is included in that. If there's any questions anyone has, we probably would even have potentially, we could talk about it now and probably would be better if tomorrow I won't know for sure when I can jump back on the line. if there's any questions commissioners have on any of those items. If not, my assumption is you have everything you need in terms of the decision spreadsheet. And I guess I wanted to talk through that if we're gonna do this via Zoom, do you want to plan to send can you plan to send that to Cami by end of business tomorrow or 8 o'clock in the morning so that we can begin budget deliberations on Wednesday, and then we can try to do it with a shared screen? And see what each commissioner has, and then we'll just try to kind of walk through it for deliberations.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I have some questions. Just, I'm not smart enough to understand what Cami sent us over the weekend. I guess the base of my question is, it seemed like we had a much smaller amount from LDCFM, and I don't see how that's showing up in the bottom line. I guess that's my question, and maybe I'm hopeful that it would help our bottom line, but I'm probably wrong.
Okay, so that's a great question. And usually I get a little more ability to explain things instead of just sending out emails hoping you understand. So on that decision sheet, you will notice that the non-appropriated balance line for general fund has gone up quite a bit. That is where the LDCFM change lies. So it didn't change anything in mill levy unless you guys instruct me to do that. But it is sitting in fund balance. That's essentially our fund balance. Do you see that on the worksheet?
Cami, do you have a way of showing your screen and walking me through that? I just feel like I'm not getting it.
Let me
or maybe my fellow commissioners can explain it to me, because
let me connect to, I'm connected to a couple computers here. Let me pull up a spreadsheet.
And I would say that, just to remind commissioners, this sort of non-appropriated fund balance number, we show it in revenues at the top under fund balance, but then under expense, it's shown under the non-appropriated balance, which is on page 40 of your whole budget document. And then Cami can show you where it's at on the sheet. But I'm looking at it on page 40, and we went from 5.1. So when I gave you a proposed budget, it was $5.2 million, 5.187 was our non-appropriated balance. That in the admin column, so 2021 admin budget, which would be your budget, that's where commissioner changes or anything made after I sort of give it to you is reflected. On that next column, it has increased to 5,946. So that's the non-appropriated balance that Cami's talking about.
So we can apply that to supplemental requests, is what you're saying, right?
You can. And what we probably need to talk through, though, is if there are ongoing expenses,
right,
the impact of that on our fund balance that you wanted me to keep high so that we could accommodate COVID. And then to just remember also that part of the reason why that is so high is because we did not do market merit in 21 for employees as well. So those would be my considerations while Cami's pulling that up.
Almost there.
And Sarah, I don't know if you're planning on giving us any kind of update on CARES Act funding, because I think that, I know you didn't you have a call on Monday? Wasn't that right? It seemed like a week ago. And I think that may have some impact on decisions.
Yeah. And what I have is, we're working on an update to the commission that we will give to you Wednesday as a part of the commission meeting at 4 and 5:30, so not necessarily for budget deliberations, but, you know, some of this is still, there's a lot to be decided. The way our approach is going to be is to use the recovery team to help us develop our direct aid plan, which is what the state has asked us to do, is to develop a direct aid plan. We need to develop that plan by August 15th and submit it. So we're going to have to make some decisions on budget before we're going to know for exactly what's in our direct aid plan and what's approved on our direct aid plan. So I think, you know, we're just gonna have to feel our way through this. If there are particular concerns that commissioners, you know, request that they feel like, is this something that's eligible? I think we could talk through that. And ultimately the decision on what's in the direct aid plan falls to the commission, but we were gonna use the recovery team framework to help us develop it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm looking for some guidance on which things we think may be able to qualify for some of that CARES Act funds, and which things we're thinking, no, this doesn't.
And I think I can give that to you, but I want to put some big old air quotes around all of this, because ultimately what we think at this point could qualify for CARES Act is still subject to the state saying yes. And they won't say yes on that until August. And so, you know, like I had mentioned, I think that the expansion of the expansion of like Just Foods warehouse to be able to accommodate more social distancing and shopping internally is something that I think could qualify for CARES Act if they're able to get it all spent this year. So, and sometimes it's about the consideration of what can be accomplished, because, you know, remember with CARES Act funding, everything has to be expended in 2020. So I think we're can talk through some of that. If you have particular things that you want me to try to find out, if, you know, whether or not we can include it in a plan, the sooner the better in terms of, you know, making sure we're on the same page for that.
Okay.
Okay. Looks like Cammie's got the sheet up.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Okay. This goes through all the options, all the supplementals off to the right, and off on the left side is the recommended budget versus last year's budget. But when it says recommended, that includes any modifications we've made since then. So when we found errors or had some changes that were just minor, but we've talked through them in these meetings, I've kept this up to date. So you will see anything in red over here as a negative means that you would be removing that from the budget, and you would put it in your column as removing it. And anything in black, if you put that in your column, you would put it in as a positive and you would be adding it to the budget. But then if you go all the way down to the bottom, so we've got everybody's request off to the right, you go all the way down to the bottom of the general fund, which is the majority of the spreadsheet, you will see a subtotal for the general fund. And you can subtract from this non-appropriated amount to impact your mill levy so that you can keep your mill levy flat or whatever you're trying to do to it. But that's where Sarah says that anything that is not one time that comes out of this will impact you every year. And I will email you a new city internal services amount for LDCFM because that's only about half of it. It's actually 667,922 as they updated me today. But you'll get that in your email. And does that make it more clear though, Patrick? Do you see more of the number you were looking for in that 5948911?
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think so. I remember I remember last year having to sort of flip my mind how I thought about this. So this is starting to, the way I think about it seems inverse of the way that you think about it, but that's fine. I think I understand. If not, I know where to ask questions.
Well, and if you, and then if you wanted to see the change from what I proposed to where you are now, that's on page 40. So you, before Cami had made any modifications, that number would have been 5187064.
And
Now it's 5948911. And Cami, you know, I always get confused with this, and we've talked through it before. This number is slightly different than what we show fund balance starting the next year as. So it's, you know, if you go back to revenues, that number is still sitting at like 6 million.
Well, the number you see in revenues is the number we're starting 2021 with. The number that you see right here is the number we're ending 2021 with and starting 2022 with.
Right. So as you can, right. So does that make sense, Commissioner? So we start the year at 6 million, which you see on page 1, $6,443,220. We're going to, through this budget, if we change nothing else, we would hold $5,948,911 as our retained fund balance through this budget. So what that means is you've got a small difference between the 6 million and the 5.9 that are being spent on one-time things as a result of this budget. Right? I got that right, Cami, right?
Yep, you did.
Okay. So, but the hard part here, you know, and so this is different, you know, we've oftentimes, you know, but there's the interplay here. You know, there was a strong conversation about trying to increase our fund balance to accommodate issues with, for COVID-19 preparedness. Also, you know, as you can see there, we had 2 million in the 2020 budget, and as we started 2020, we actually made that 4 million because of the 2 million we held back that we were going to use to help ease in the operations of the jail. So, you know, to me, 4 million is what we had really intended, but I mean, as the commission knows, it's a pretty small fund balance. It is also important to remember here, and I don't know if Cami really shows it on this spreadsheet, but we are retaining the $2.4 million that we cut in 2019 of ongoing revenue from the 2019 cuts. And I think that's up under CIP, right, Cami?
Yeah, it's kind of it doesn't come across that straightforward.
Yeah.
So this is it right there. I've highlighted it, the criminal justice capital or whatever you deem it.
And that is the ongoing amount that we cut in 2019 that we're holding as the through line to also, that was meant to help fund the operations of the jail. So ongoing funds could be taken out of that as well to support ongoing operations.
Yeah, that's what's known as our cuts money. When we talk about 2019 cuts money that remains, that's that number.
So I think, does that help?
It does for me.
Okay.
It's always clear as mud.
Email me or call me if you need anything.
I know where to find you.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hope by Wednesday night I have more to tell you on CARES, but really what it's going to be is, you know, it's just going to, you know, but I would say, commissioners, like, this is a pretty flexible budget. So if you know, if we think like a particular supplemental request is a good target for CARES Act funding, and you tell us that as administration, we can kind of proceed with that. And if we get to past August 15th and we find out, whoops, no, the state said it's not going to work, can't do capital, something like that, can't get it done on time, you know, you've seen here in this budget that we have a lot of flexibility. So I do think that's something we could bring back to the commission and say, hey, you know, it was rejected for CARES Act funding. What do you want to do? Is there anything you want to do, or do you just want to wait and let them resubmit for 2022? So I do think that you know, while I feel bad that we're in this situation where you have to make decisions on certain things without knowing all of the information on everything else. I mean, in my 10 years here, this is the most flexibility we've had in a budget to be able to accommodate unanticipated changes. So I want to leave the commission with that kind of assurance. So the plan would be is that by end of business tomorrow, you would get your spreadsheet to Cami. Wednesday morning, we would start looking at it similar to what you saw there for a while. We would kind of go through the list and be able to accommodate it. And then we would plan on starting again at 11 o'clock on Thursday morning for an hour, and then going into Friday if needed.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate your dedication to this, and I know it's a lot of information and there's a lot of moving parts. So thank you for your sticking with it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I think we're done then until tomorrow. All right, thank you.